The question that we're going to try and answer today for K-2 is, how does a computer know what word comes next? Like, it'll often tell us, give us suggestions, and how does it know that? So we're going to try and answer that. I want to introduce myself and have Kat and Mark introduce themselves. I'm Vicki Sedgwick. I am an elementary computer science teacher in the San Fernando Valley. I teach at a private school up here. I primarily teach K-3 this year. And I was one of the writers on AI for K-12. I was actually the lead of the K-2 team. So, Kat?
Thanks, Vicki. My name's Catherine Goyette, and I am currently the computer science coordinator for California Department of Education. But my first year teaching was in kindergarten, and I taught first grade and second grade as well. So I love hearing all of Vicki's ideas. Mark's helped a lot with this as well, and I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask questions in there or unmute if you'd like as well.
And I'm Mark Lowndy. I'm not a teacher, although my first experience in learning was in kindergarten. I'm an instructional technology specialist at a K-5 elementary in Silicon Valley at Cupertino, in the Cupertino Union School District. And I'm in charge of all our technology, and I tend to, by default and by desire, I'm sort of the pointy end of the stick on advanced learning methods and things like getting involved with AIs. And yeah, I've been doing this or organizing for this organization, or AI for CA, for about 3 or 4 years now. And I guess this is our second year of doing this. And I'll be doing a little hands-on demonstrating a little bit later as Vicki directs, which is why there's 2 of me in here. Oh, wait, there aren't 2 of me. I have to go get the second me in here.
Get the second me, you in here. All right. So a little bit of background, and Emily talked a lot about this, but I'm sure everybody's heard about ChatGPT and about Bard from Google by now, but we're going to try and explore at a very rudimentary level kind of how they work. Okay, how would these large language models work? What do they do? So they the models take in large amounts of data. Like, pretty much they read the entire internet is how they did this, and they use a neural network. They use a specific architecture that uses a transformer, and in fact the T in GPT stands for transformer. GPT is a generative pre-trained transformer, so it's transforming the data that it's bringing in to give you output. And large language models are really good at finding patterns and relationships between words and phrases, and in making predictions about what words should come next. Okay, but they don't do it one word at a time. They kind of do, but they're looking at it in bigger chunks. It's not like autocorrect, which I know some of us always still like have a love-hate relationship with. It often doesn't work for me. So people often talk about large language models as being thoughtful and creative, but they really aren't either of those things. They're just it's really good math. They predict based on probabilities and give us the information that they think that we want to know. They don't know anything. They're not a knowledge base. It's not a search engine. It's not like an encyclopedia. It's not a knowledge base, which is why they do things like have hallucinations, because to them it's all the same. It doesn't know. It doesn't know anything. They're just good at figuring out which word follows the last one. So our lesson today, it's going to simulate a language model on a very small scale, right? The data that we're going to be using is actually sentence strips that you can print out, and we'll give you links to these, that your students can use to build this language model. We're going to cut apart the sentence strips to build our model. And our model is going to define the relationship between words, what order they go in, and that kind of thing. So just as a large language model generates text based on relationships between the words or phrases, probability of what comes next, our model is going to also use the relationship between the words in our sentences in 5 containers, basically, that is going to divvy up our sentences. And then we're going to use that to create sentences, right? So prior to the lesson, you would be printing out sentence strips. And let me just throw those into chat really quick, except my chat went away. Of course it did. I'll find it in a minute. So we print out sentence strips and fill in the blank sentence strips so the students can actually change some of the words in some of the sentences to make them more theirs. So when I would deliver this lesson, the first thing I start out with is this. And I say to the kids, my kids use Scratch Junior. And they also use, they'll search for things. This is actually Pic Collage where they're searching. And a lot of them notice that when they start typing words, it'll give them other words. It'll give them suggestions on the next word, or it gives them suggestion on, we type poisonous over here, and poisonous snakes was one of the things. And it's like, good, I didn't have to type the whole word, right? So predictive text, which is what this is, has been happening for a long time, right? We see it all the time on our phones. The kids see it all the time when they're doing things like this. But how does it really work? How does a computer know what word or phrase you might want next? So at that point, I actually asked the kids to tell me, well, what do you think it does? So what do you guys think? How does it work? How does it know? I can't see chat, Kat, so if anybody's putting anything into chat.
We're good.
I'll interrupt you then if you need, if there's a question that I can't answer.
Okay.
I put the link to the strips in there.
Great, thanks. Well, predictive text is also machine learning. It uses machine learning, but it basically builds its dictionary or its model based upon things that you type in your device. So it learns you, okay? It's learning you by what you type. Like if I always type birthday after happy, it's always going to suggest birthday to me, right? If you'll notice in this one, as I type happy, it says Mother's Day. That's because I did it just the other day. So guess what is coming up on Sunday? Mother's Day. So it knew I was typing happy. It thought, ooh, maybe you want to say Mother's Day today. So it's based on what it knows about your environment and what it knows about you. So it learns and hopefully gets better over time. Autocorrect works the same way. It learns the words you want to use and corrects, in theory, corrects them to those. Large language models go beyond that because they can write not just what's your next word, but they can write sentences, essays, stories, poems, right? But they do it the same way. They're still predicting what comes next. They're still looking at the probability of what comes next. They just have a lot more data than your autocorrect or your predictive text has. So our lesson's going to be based on green eggs and ham. So if you're doing a lesson and your kids don't know the book, I just read it to them, before you do the lesson. We're using the green eggs and ham because the text is repetitive in nature. There are a lot of sentences that start with the word I. And those are the sentences we're going to use. We're going to use the sentences that start with I that are said by the character that is not Sam. We're not using, I am Sam, Sam I am. We're using the ones that the not Sam character says. So for students, I would say, today we want to build our own language model that can create sentences that sound like they're written by Dr. Seuss. Okay. To do that, we're going to build an artificial intelligence language model based on sentences from Green Eggs and Ham. After we've used the sentences from the book to train our language model, we're going to take some of those same sentences with some of the words removed, and we're going to replace them with things we might want to say. So instead of saying, I do not like green eggs and ham, we might write a sentence that says, I do not like, apples and bananas. Okay, so we're going to make that change as well, so we can mix it up a little and not just use Dr. Seuss's words. So once we've trained our model on all of these sentences, and we're not going to use, from a teacher perspective, we're not going to use every sentence out of the book. We're going to use one so that every one of your students has a sentence they can put in the model, and your students also can customize a sentence to go in the model. Okay, so if you had 30 students, you might use 30 sentences, right? So I'll say, are you ready? And we're going to get started. So our model looks something like this, except that it can be any container. We're going to have 5 containers, maybe like these 5 containers, right? And we're going to cut up our sentence strips and put them in the appropriate spot. We have 5 containers, okay? And our sentence strips are labeled. We're going to put them in the appropriate containers. So you'll have printed these. So large language models are created on computers today, but we're going to create ours using paper and 5 containers. So if you ever use, containers for sorting and things in your classroom, whatever containers you have, doesn't matter. They don't have to be colored. They don't have to be anything. It's great if you can label them so they match. Like, I want to put number 1 in the one that has the number 1 on it and it's a circle, and number 2, so it makes it easier, especially if you're talking kindergarten, right? So each student is going to get a sentence strip. You're going to add it to our model. So let's get started creating our language model with our first sentence. All right. So our first sentence is, I do not like that, Sam I am. Okay. So what I would do as a teacher, I have passed out the sentence strips to the kids. I'm going to say, who has the sentence, I do not like that, Sam I am? Mark, do you have that sentence? Be able
If you look right here, let me see my camera here, you will see that I have 5 containers. Right, I'm in our makerspace, and I just grabbed 5 of these plastic containers somebody gave us. They look like they're probably meant to hold like food from a grocery store. And inside, I cut up each of the 2s and the 1s, etc. Almost the green eggs and ham is the long part, so that was the hardest one to cut up. But that's basically it. It's that simple.
right.
Do that.
And what I would do when I'm teaching this is I'm going to say, who has that sentence, and have them read their sentences. And that I'm going to have that student come up and I'm going to say, okay, you're going to cut apart your sentence strip. So I'm going to give them scissors and have them just cut apart the sentence strip. I've already pre-cut them into sentences, right? So they're going to cut them. I'm cutting mine right now, as you see. And then they're going to put them into the appropriate bucket. So number 1, number 2, number 3,
You'll quickly notice that
number
number
4,
one only has I in it.
right? Number 5. So, and then I'm going to say, we also added the parts of this sentence to an online map, language map, that kind of shows the order of our sentence and how these words relate to one another. So our sentence is going to start with the word I, followed by the words do not, then the word like, then the word that, and then it'll end with semi-am. And I know it ends because it has a period at the end, just like all sentences have punctuation at the end. Right. So then I do the same thing and I say, I do not, I bring up the next one and say, who's that? And we go through these. These slides, I'm not going to go through them in great deal, but these slides have only a few of the sentences. I didn't put all of them on here because after you've done a few examples with the students, you can just say, okay, now who has it, now read your sentence. Okay, come up and add it, right? You don't have to do them, but I would have, a few of them come up and say, cut them apart, add them to my buckets, right? And it's, and then I would say, and we added it to our map. I starts the same way. Do not, it's the next one's the same way. The relationship's the same. The next word's the same, like. So it has the same first 3 words that our first sentence has. But then it says them, and then it ends the same way as our first sentence. We're kind of pointing out the relationship between these words and how they flow together. And then we're going to do the third sentence, right? And again, you say, okay, who has, I do not like green eggs and ham. And that student will come up, they'll cut it apart, they'll put it into the bins, right? And we'll again say, oh, okay, so now I do not like green eggs and ham. But we don't have a 5th one. So why don't we have a 5th one? Well, I wait for a student to answer that, right? So we don't have a 5th one, of course, because we already have a period here. So we're done with our sentence. Okay, so our sentence strips have the punctuation, so they know once I draw one that has punctuation at the end, I have my full sentence. It's either going to be 4 or 5, depending on the sentences. So then I go on and we bring in another one. This one is slightly different because now it's got would not, right? Instead of do not. So now we've introduced another set of words in bin 2, and like green eggs and ham, and we've got here or there. So
Or
we
a
got
fox with a
with a fox in a box, all of those. So you're going to be adding those. Now, when I get to this one, and you could even, if you didn't want to, I like to do 5 or 6 modeled in front of everybody. We're going to cut them up. We're going to do it, show it, especially when I'm dealing with KM1. We do the same thing. Who has, I would not like them anywhere. Great, come on up. We're going to cut it apart and we're going to add it to our map. Does anybody notice something different about the I and the like. Anybody notice anything different about the word I and the word like?
They stay the same. Same.
Yeah, if you notice, they've all stayed the same. And if you notice on our map, the border has gotten bigger because we have more of these in the bins than the other words. And in fact, what word do you think, if I picked out of bin 3 right now, what word do you think I'd get? I've only added these sentences that you've seen, right? So what word do you think I would get if I pulled out of bin number 3?
Like.
We'd get like, because it's the only word we've put in, right? And kids can usually see that because we keep saying, I would not like, I do not like, I do not, right? And then we go on and we add a couple positive ones. I will eat them anywhere. Okay, so now we have a third word here, and we have a new word. Now it's not just like in bin 3, it's eat, right? And I actually really, on the one where I ask what word would you get, because I've only put those in, I actually have somebody pull out a bin 3 and say, what word you get? And it will be like. You can even show them all because there's only 5 of them. You can say, they're all like, right? So I will eat them anywhere. And then we say, okay, let's do one more like this that we add to our map. Whoa, look how big I and like are now. But we have another word in bin 2, do. Okay, I do like them. I do like green eggs and ham. Okay. And each time we add them, we're defining the relationship between the words by putting them into the right bins so that our model will know how to make sentences from our sentences. The next thing that we do at that point, and then I might have them pull some, at that point I've done the 5 or 6 or 7 that I have come up to the front. Now I say, okay, if you haven't done yours, I call on, this table group and say, read me your sentence, cut it apart, come put it in the model so that everybody has had the chance to add to the model, right? So put number 1 and number 1, number 2 and number 2. By then they've seen it enough, they know what they're supposed to do. So it's just read your sentence, let's add it. Then we say, well, those are just Dr. Seuss's words. So I may, at that point, have them pull some, have somebody pull from number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and build a sentence and say, what's that sentence, right? But then I say, let's add some things so that it's not always green eggs and ham, right? Or it's not always like, right? So I'm going to hand out another sentence strip to everybody. And this time, what you're going to do is you're going to look where the blanks are. You're going to fill in those blanks. So like, I do not like blank. I will not eat them blank. Like, I will not eat them, on a bike, whatever. I would not, and this one, number 3, can be tough for kindergarten. Sometimes it's easier to leave this one out for kindergarten because they have a hard time coming up with different words necessarily, but they can come up with some. I do not like them. Again, where do you not like them? Right? I will not eat them. Again, where? The last one is one I typically only would hand out to 2nd graders because it's changing the I. Now, the big problem with changing the I is it has to be a plural pronoun or a plural noun in order to get the subject verb correlation right. So that's why I typically do it with second grade, and I say it has to be a plural. It can't be, like your name, right? Because the sentence won't make sense, right? And I might even talk through a couple examples that say that doesn't make sense, right? So, and then I might show, and then I give some examples and I say, okay, so you might say, I do not like apples and bananas, right? I will not eat them on a plane. I would not take them anywhere, right? I'm not eating them. I'm not liking them. I do not like them in a restaurant. I don't care where I get them. I don't like them. I will eat them on the beach. And then I gave an example of the other one, which is dogs do like green eggs and ham. That's because we talked about this yesterday, and dogs like everything. So, all right. So then they fill out these, and we have them come up. And typically I'll call them by table group or by row or however you've got them organized, and have each group come up and add them to here. So now I will have a whole model that has a class worth of sentences from the Dr. Seuss book and a class work with some fill in the blanks that are very Dr. Seuss like, because they're the sentences from the book, just with some words removed, right? So then I do this whole group. I say, now we're going to test our model. And I'm going to stop sharing here in a minute. We're going to have Mark test his model, right? Because you have them in there, right? You're going to pull some out for me. So what I typically do is I have them come up in groups of 4 to 6 kids at a time. And I have them pull, like I have the first kid pull from one, the second, and then I have them read their sentence, right? And we say, once we pull from 4, I say, check, is there punctuation? Is there a period at the end there? Okay, we need to pull from 5 because there's not, right? And then they read their sentence, right, as a group. As they do that, I typically record it. I'll put it on a document or I'll write it on the board so that we can say, okay, group 1 has this sentence, right? Because we're going to have them write it down and we're going to have them illustrate it. We're not going to have every kid pull it. We're going to have each group pull it, do it as a full group. So I come up and I have all the groups do it. And then they're going to actually write their sentence and draw a picture of it. Or they could illustrate it in another way. For example, maybe they write it down and they act it out, right, in kindergarten. Or maybe they write it down and then they program something in Scratch Junior to show what the sentence is. Okay, so you can have them follow up with whatever from this sentence they've generated. Now, sometimes you'll get nonsense sentences even from this, especially once you've got some of the fill in the blanks. And so we have to decide as humans, what are we going to do with nonsense sentences, right? Are we going to accept them? Or are we going to say, no, that's not good. And let's pick again, right? And try to pick a real sentence. So Mark, you want to, I'm going to stop sharing and you can share. And you can pick from your model for us. Let's generate a sentence.
Let's see if I actually can share.
So I want you to create a sentence. Let's use our trained model. So pick one.
By the way, I only have sheets 1 and 6.
That's okay. This is a much smaller model than you'd probably have in your class. right? I have small classes and I have 18 students. So I'm going to have like 36, at least 36 in there. I could also pre-cut the other ones because we give you 35 examples. So you could use all 35. You could just pre-do those and put them in the bin. So pull one from each, but check on number 4 and make sure that the sentence needs to continue.
I,
Okay.
that's it. So far, so
Because
good.
we haven't done any substitutions for I, so we'll always get I.
So
I do not. I'm guessing we'll get like.
yeah, I'm gonna get like, because I don't think eat was gonna fit.
Well, I think you might have eat, but you're not going to have too much. You're going to have way more likes than anything else. Them. Cool.
In a house, so
I do not like them in a house. So then I'll ask, does that sentence make sense? Yes, it does. Okay, that's your group sentence. And I want you to illustrate it. The fun part is when you've got their fill in the blanks, you start picking some things that sound kind of Dr. Seussy, but they're not Dr. Seussy, right? And you're combining them in different ways than the Dr. Seuss book. And it's kind of showing them, okay, why did Mark get like? Well, because it may not even be everything he has in there, but he might have, 5 likes and 1 eat. So he's most likely going to get a like. See, he's got an eat. I thought you would have an eat from that. Since you said you had that last page. So yeah, we need to think in terms of, we're not going to necessarily use the word probability with our students, but we want to kind of talk about the fact that that's what it is, right? Like was in there more, so we got like,
but
right?
just for our understanding, those thickening lines,
Right.
those are giving the AI big hints on what the next word is going to be.
Correct.
Like I got super, super thick. So the AI is going to know that's going to be the first word.
Right. Right. Especially I. It definitely knows. But even further, like even here,
Right.
like that's going to be the most likely third thing we pull. Right.
As Emmy said, it's just math. This is just
It's
statistical
just
probability.
math. Right. And that's very much actually how Chat GPT and those work, though they do not always take the most probable word, because then the answer would always be the same, right? They do it within a certain amount of probability. They do use everything because then they're likely to come up with sentences that aren't sentences or paragraphs that aren't paragraphs. So, but they do it within a certain range so that they're not always giving you the most common. And here we aren't going to necessarily get the most common because the kid's going to reach in and pull out a slip of paper. So it could be whatever, right? So, um, we're kind of getting at we've got this model. Now, what do you do with this model afterwards? One thing that's nice is this model can actually make a really good station within a language arts program, for example. You can add it in there and have them generate and illustrate sentences or generate and write a Scratch Junior program about their sentence at any point in time during your language arts rotations as one of your stations, right? Because they have to look for, is there punctuation? Did it make sense? What does that sentence say? So now I'm going to illustrate it and show you in some way what that says. So it can be a fun one to repeat. Okay. And you can even add to it over time. You can say, oh, let's add more of our own, right? Let's replace different words this time, right? So you can think about that kind of thing to keep it going, rotate it in as a station sometimes, beyond just doing it as a day of AI. So we asked at the beginning, and this is a question I asked the kids. So, how does a computer know what word comes next? If we think about our language model, how did our language model know what word would be next? So I always ask the kids that and say, how does it know? Now they don't always know, right? But they'll get the idea of, well, I know I have to do it in order, right? So we've defined, our AI knows the relationship between words because we defined it using our containers, right? And did a lot of you pull the word like out of the third bucket, or pull the word I out of the first bucket? Why? Right? Oh, it's there more, right? So the idea is to get them thinking in terms of AI, real true AI, generates sentences, paragraphs, all these things, this kind of same way. But it builds its own model, okay? It comes up with those relationships of how words follow one another. But it does it based on data. If we fed an AI just that exact same data, it would come up with a lot of the same relationships we did, because that's how those words relate to one another in those sentences. So the idea is to get the kids understanding that it doesn't magically create something. It has data, in this case, our sentences, either from Green Eggs and Ham or the ones that we customize from Green Eggs and Ham. And that's how it creates it. And that's how AI does it too. The idea is to get them thinking in terms of, like Emily said, it's not magic, right? It's math. And in this case, the math may be to them the order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I go in that order, right? And the math might, for some of them, will be, oh, there was a lot of the word like in the bin 3. That's why we got it, right? So they're thinking probability, even though they're not using the term probability.
What word should we use if probability would be over a kinder first level? I mean, popular, I mean, the most, I guess we would
Right,
say
most.
the
I like to do
greatest.
most. Yeah, and that's why I always stop after I've done that set where it's only like, and I actually say, when the like got the bold border, and I say, what am I, if I picked out of bin 3 right now, what word would I get?
Or
And then I actually pick out of bin 3
you could just
and
go to bin
show.
one and just start pulling out. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
See,
but I want to
right.
do like, because we end up adding others to that one. We don't to I, unless we're in second grade and we decide to let them do plural nouns at the
But
beginning.
you could ask them the question,
Yeah,
what do you think the next one's going to be?
right.
I
The
was
most
thinking
likely
visually,
answer is,
instead of predicting like that, should we concretely do it like in a bar graph for them to see at the beginning, or should we more do it like what we have, the predictive of like a chat GPT?
Well, the idea here is to kind of get them thinking along what a chat GPT might do, which is why we're trying to kind of simulate in an unplugged fashion a language model, right? And why we're showing it as a language map with basically vector relationships between the words, because that's kind of, when you see things in AI, that's often how they're represented, on how relationships get built within the neural networks. So that's kind of why we're using that. But if we want to make that math tie heavier, yeah, we could always add a bar graph in. I don't think that would be a bad tie to add in to make that math connection more solid. right.
Well,
Because I
More,
think
more integration,
anytime
the better.
anytime we can connect to math and connect to literacy, I mean, you know, let's make those connections as deep as we can make them.
and if you're thinking of the math vocabulary and standards for K-2, right? Kindergarten is going to use the words, if I'm recalling correctly from when I taught years ago, and it was Common Core. So more and less was the verbiage that I taught the kindergartners. So more and less. And then for second grade, we did do a little bit of statistics. So we did talk about like the most, the mode, because I remember teaching them the most is the mode, it has the most. So the bar graph idea could, so
Right,
there's a little bit of stats.
right,
Not so much, we didn't really say it was probability, but
right.
They
It's
don't have to
kind
have
of
the word.
it's kind of like pre-teaching probability, right? And we do that. I mean, we're by starting with more and less, and by starting, then teaching mode and teaching those things, we're getting to the ability to then talk about probability, right? So we don't need to use the word, but the idea of why do you think we picked like, oh, there's more of the word like in that bin than any other word is in that bin, right?
And
Or all of the words in that bin are like, right?
at the very least, using that method teaches them probabilities intuitively. They'll understand it internally, even if they don't have the words for it yet.
Right,
That'll come.
right. But yeah, I think the more connections we can make, the better. So, and this keeps all of them active because each of them gets to cut it up and put it in themselves. And then as a group, they get to build a sentence, and then I like to have them have a tangible thing, which is why a lot of times I'll have them write it on paper and draw something, right? And then they'll take a picture and seesaw and to share it and that kind of stuff. But if you have time and you're in Scratch Junior and you like to code, it can be fun to, program a character to do whatever your sentence is, right? Um, or even have a group put on a little skit to show what their sentence means, right? Since we're doing it more we're doing it more small group at that point. We're having each small group illustrate one sentence. So they could do it as a whole group by putting on a skit, or they could each individually write it and illustrate it the way that they want to illustrate it, or program it.
Does anybody here teach this? Does anybody here teach in Spanish? Nobody. Okay. Because there is a Spanish version of Green Eggs and Ham that I think, and I've read it to kindergartners on Dr. Seuss Day, and I think it would adapt really well.
Yeah, it is. Some of the problem is some of the grammar
Right.
doesn't
It's not one-to-one, but I
it's
think
not one-to-one, so
over.
you're going to have to be picky about the sentences you
Right.
use. But yes, you could do the Spanish version as long as you were picky about the sentences, so it would fit into the 5-bin model. So
Yeah, we have a DLI school, so I would help them. I'm a TOSA to support them, so that would be something to work with the English only side with the and that stuff like that. Thank you.
right, right. But yeah, and there's translations of it all over. So, and if they don't know Green Eggs and Hams, there's some good read alouds on YouTube of it and stuff. So, and it's an easy enough book to get your hands on. I'm sure your library probably has it.
Probably 20 seconds away from a copy right now.
Yeah.
Our library is right over there.
Right. And it's not one of the super controversial Dr. Seuss books. So,
No, green eggs. What about the blue eggs? They don't talk about that. They don't want you to know.
You're funny, Mark.
Just funny looking.
So, thank you very much. Hopefully, you've got something you can use or adapt a little and use. And, everybody knows their own kid population the best. So, Feel free, make copies of the slides. Did we put the slides in?
Are they all? They're on the website though,
They're
correct?
on the website.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
And I'll
Don't
put that link in
forget to
again.
do the.
Yeah, they're on the
the-
website. And feel free, make a copy, adapt it, it's we want it to fit your kids, right? So adapt it in any way you need to. And if you click on the K-2 and go to 2023, you can open the slides and make a copy for yourself. And all the links to the documents are on the K-2 page. They're also in the speaker notes. There's a lot of speaker notes that kind of have a little script, and they have background knowledge for the teacher.